Well, hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Good morning.
Yeah, awesome. See, Colin knows. There you go, man. We had Corey on here last week. He didn't know what to do. So,
Oh, poor guy.
poor guy. So proud of you. So, before we jump in, me and Colin were talking. Nate is here with us too. We were talking about the earthquake in Prescott yesterday. So,
I'll tell you what, when I moved here, did not anticipate an earthquake happening.
yeah, me either. Like, I didn't know they happened in the mountains.
I
Like,
didn't
what-
either.
Like, what is going on? It's been windier than ever. It's been the snow last year. Everybody was like, oh, it's never been that bad. I feel like these people from Prescott were hiding stuff.
I believe that too. And they're keeping with it.
They're-
They're keeping with their story. Like they're holding true.
Yeah, Gary he just keeps blaming it on us. Like,
Oh, I
that we
know.
brought it. It's
Oh,
our
yeah.
fault. I don't feel like it's our fault.
All I know is I was sitting there and all of a sudden my house starts shaking, the whole house. And looked at my wife and I said, I think that was an earthquake. I'm from Texas. We don't have earthquakes.
Yeah, I have, I got some aftershocks as a kid from big ones like in California. So I was in a text thread with Anthony. So I was on staff. He's a California boy. So he was instant, like, oh, that was an earthquake. Like, he didn't even hesitate. Like, he
Right.
knew it was an earthquake. So my wife and I assumed it was our kids. That's the first thing we blamed was our boys. We like, oh, they broke something. They shattered a door. Like what? Like our whole house too was like
That has to be a
shaking.
big door.
Yeah, a big one. But we just assumed it was them. And then I was like, wait a minute. Like we're kind of close to the airport. So then I was like, wow, did something just happen? Like, was there an
Oh, yeah.
explosion? You know, we've always lived near military bases here recently. And so we have all these evacuation plans. Like when you move in to all the communities we've been in, literally the last 2 or 3. So we were like, did they just drop something? Like,
My
what
favorite
happened?
thing about it is I immediately, of course, I hop on Facebook because I know
Oh, they're talking
people are going
about
to be on there ASAP. And sure enough, on like all the groups,
Yep.
people are like, what was that? Was that an earthquake? And then you have one person chime in and go, nope, that was an explosion, like confidently. And then the next person posts the screenshot of like from the like official people that
Yeah.
says it was a 3.8 earthquake. And they're
3.8
like,
earthquake.
nope, that's not what it was. And it's just
Conspiracy.
oh, yeah, I love it. It's so good.
Which, again, there's some joys of community, right?
Uh-huh.
Like,
Oh,
community
yeah.
is great because you knew people were going to be for sure
Oh, yeah.
talking about it. You
And
know,
they're arguing over the earthquake. I mean,
we're a mess.
yes.
You know, my wife jokingly, I don't know, she may not actually been joking, was like, I thought Jesus was coming back. And I was like, oh no, here we go. I got earthquakes and rumors of earthquakes and war.
Birth
and
pains, baby.
birth pains. But yeah, so first one for us, Prescott earthquake. Apparently, if you're here or have been in Prescott longer, it wasn't the first one ever. So find an OG Prescott person and ask them. I guess apparently it happened before. So
Who would have known?
who would have known? So, all right. Hey, so Colin, you said yesterday you've been here 2.5 years. You got a family. So maybe for the people who don't know you, who maybe haven't interacted, aren't in students, don't have kids, maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I actually grew up in the Dallas area, in Texas. That's why, unfortunately, I'm a Cowboy fan. And so, grew up there my entire life. Then God actually, after college, brought me to the Austin area. My wife and I, we got married in 2016. We met at college. And so one of the funny things is when I first met her, she had told me, I'm never going to marry somebody going into ministry. She said that was a red flag, non-negotiable. And so God obviously is messing with her on that front. But
Here we are.
so I roped her in. And so she and her and I got married in 2016. And then we actually we've got 3 kiddos now. And our first kiddo, Nash, he's 4. And then we got Sawyer, who's 2. And then Juniper, who is 6 months. So, you know, it's been a wild ride being a dad and having 3 kiddos, and
Yeah.
it's been fun.
Awesome, man. That's so cool. Yeah. It is definitely it's fun. Yeah. It's a word we can use.
Yeah.
3 kids under 4. I remember that life. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does get better. It
For sure.
It does.
And
The struggle's real, homie.
oh, no doubt about
Yeah.
it. And the thing that just keeps happening in my life, and I expect it's just going to continue to happen, is, you know, I got married and then I realized, I was like, man, I'm super selfish. Like, I'm a really selfish person. And then I thought I was like doing pretty good there for a while, and
When
I
you had
figured
kids.
it out. Then I had my first kid, and then I was like, wow, I'm really, really selfish.
Yeah.
And then it just gets that recognition of that truth just
Right.
gets more and more,
Yeah.
with each kid you have and
Yeah,
the different
definitely.
things.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, man, again, I think yesterday you did a great job. Really appreciate just how you were open and vulnerable and just shared from your heart. Definitely looks like that this is a discipline that's really important to you. You speak out of just kind of knowledge and just personal life application pieces that it's been a big deal. So, so again, just appreciate it. Think you did a great job. I love your basic boiled down point of the reason why people don't do it because it's really, really hard, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's that simple.
It is. It really is. Like we make it like there's a lot of other excuses we could say, but at the end of the day, I really think that's the heart of why most people say no.
For sure. And I understand it.
Yeah.
Like I get it. Like I'm not even saying like, hey, just do it. Like get over it.
Yeah.
I understand it's hard and that some of those reasons are like, yeah, there might be consequences.
Right.
Like if you confess your sins.
Right.
Like there might be.
Yeah.
And I get why you wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
There's things like, hey, it's hard because like, I don't know if I can trust the people that I'm going to share this with. Like there's so many different reasons why it's hard.
Right.
But trying to understand, and we couldn't unpack this as much yesterday, but despite how hard it is and despite how uncomfortable those things are, you've got to actually trust that God's got you.
Yep.
That God's got what's best for you.
Right.
That you actually doing this, no matter the outcome, it's going to be better for you
Right.
in the future.
Right. And like you said, when we get to that point where we finally share, it is like a weight off of your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
With my own discipleship group, I shared my story and shared things. And I told them, I went, man, I don't know if I had blocked this stuff out. I don't know what it was, but as I was preparing my story, I was like, man, guys, I've never shared this with anybody. Like no one. That's why. Like, and I'm pretty open with who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Like I typically, I find myself sharing most.
Sure.
Obviously, I'm not telling the whole world because I think that's our culture of social media. We tell everybody everything. So we're not
Right.
telling you to do that, right?
Don't go to the other extreme.
Don't go to the extreme. But like, I was like, oh my gosh, I had not told people.
Yeah.
And I walked away like, man, I was that burden that I didn't even realize I had been carrying.
Mm-hmm. And here's one of the things that Christians are really bad at in that realm is convincing themselves that, let's say, for example, you've had a sin that you've been, like it's 5 years ago, or it was 2 years ago, or a sin that like you have been carrying around, and convincing ourselves. We're really good about telling ourselves like, I've moved on from it. Like it's not bothering me anymore. I've confessed it to God, and no one else knows about it.
Yeah.
But like God and I have taken care of it, and so I've moved on.
Yeah.
But then if we are really honest with ourselves, we know that it's always in the back of our head.
Always in the back of our head.
It's always, like you said, it's a burden that we're carrying around constantly.
Yeah, and that confession is that idea of bringing light to it. So, again, I loved, that you just leaned into that and just were honest, and we didn't hide it from people. Like, we're not trying to, like, rope a dope you here and pull the wool over your eyes. It is really, really hard. And so we want to help you, though. We want to give you some really good tools. And today's conversation is, again, just kind of about some of that, some going a little bit deeper, maybe some more things we weren't able to hit on. So what are some stuff maybe that you weren't able to connect with, stuff that you wish you had more time? Hey, if I'm going to tell a brand new person to jump in one of these groups, what other things would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that big one is that I couldn't hit on is this concept of being complacent in your, just where you're at in your faith. And really more so being comfortable with sin. So we talked a lot about how, like, hey, if you're struggling, like, and you know that you really, it would be good for you to confess these things that are going on in your life, then do it. Like, no, it's, that's going to be good. But then I know that there are also people sitting there that they're all right with the sin that they got in their life.
Yeah.
They actually maybe like it. And Proverbs and even the Psalms too just has so much about warning in that, like for people that choose sin, choose to like stay in that, that there is so much danger in that. And that's a hard issue. Like your heart is hard at that point.
Yeah.
And so there's another separate issue there for if you are okay with your sin and you don't recognize the danger of it, then you're not going to have a reason and motivation to actually apply the confession piece and be transparent.
Yeah. And that first John verse you used was so great. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves. Like that it's in us, even as we're believers. And it's such a hard thing. And you kind of tried to touch on that a little bit. That, yeah, man, you've been forgiven, but you're still a sinner, you know, which is a hard concept to grasp because we want to believe we're not. Like, oh, I follow Jesus, I'm good. But I think real life would tell all of us, like, that's not the case.
And we've got to be careful to not go to the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Because our culture is very much, and I know I said it in the sermon as well, but because it is true. We all do make mistakes.
Right.
And we are all broken. And that happens. But we can't go there and go, well, everybody just messes up. So, like, let's just get together, confess our sins, and stay in it.
Yeah.
The goal with confession is that you are moving forward.
Yeah.
That it's not just every week you're coming in, yep, yeah, I yelled at my wife 4 times again this week, and then come back and do it all over again.
Right.
There's not growth and change happening there.
Yeah.
So that's something else that, like, we can't just be okay with, like, all of us making mistakes on a regular. Like, the goal is growth. The goal is change. And so for us knowing, like, yeah, we got to, again, coming back to Ephesians where Paul tells us, hey, live a life worthy of the calling you've received. Like, that's the reason for this.
Right.
It's not just to go and be like, oh, yep, check that box. And so now my sin's good, and I'll come back next week and do it over.
I'll do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Again, accountability question. So we're actually trying to hold you accountable to what you're doing, which means I'm actually going to ask you next week after you confess to me this week, did you actually do the thing you said you were going to do or not going to do?
Right.
Like, that's what accountability really means, right? The transparency. So, yeah, you first got to get out into the light, but then you got to have people that can help you grow and take, it's like you said, the Hebrews, spur one another on. Like, that means that I'm actually encouraging you to do the good thing. So if you're telling me I haven't read my Bible, if I confess that to you, it's great. It's awesome. What's next? Right? Like, that's the question is, so if you're getting somebody confessing to you this week, or if you're in that accountability group, discipleship group, they go, hey, I haven't read my Bible. You go, okay, what's your goal? I'm going to read it 4 days. So 3 days in, I'm going to text you. Have you read it? At least 2, right? Oh, no, I haven't done it yet. Well, you're probably not going to make it, right? You're probably going to fail. So I love that. I love the complacency aspect. What else? Anything else that you kind of were like, man, I wish I could have had more time?
Yeah, one just kind of briefly is, and then I know this isn't maybe a lot of people, I'd imagine there's some people that the aspect of maybe there's people out there that would say, hey, I actually have tried this in the past. Like, I did this. Maybe it was another church, maybe another setting, maybe it was here. I don't know, but that they've tried this and then they were hurt in how it was responded to. And so that could look in a lot of different ways. That could look that, hey, the people that you confess to, or whoever you confessed, whatever it is to, that they went around and it got out and they told other people. And that just completely, you were like, I'm done. I'm never trusting anybody with something like this again. And then, you know, or maybe that it was, the reaction was something else, as far as maybe it was something like, hey, you were serving on a team and you felt that you were pulled and it was unjustified, or you felt punished because you had come and confessed that sin. Whatever it is, as far as how you've been hurt after confessing in the past, and you're like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. Just give it a shot. Like, let's try it again. And I think specifically know that these discipleship groups, there's a certain level of structure to them.
Yeah. And again, we push confidentiality. We desire confidentiality, but I am really honest, and I tell our group,
there are certain things.
Yeah. There are certain things that if are shared, obviously we have to, again, because like you said, if I'm sharing certain things that are putting others in danger or myself in danger, then, like, I'm going to make you say, but also if you're sharing like some sins that are major, like, there is things that have to be done to help you maybe even take those next steps. And that may be telling a spouse or a coworker, whatever it may
Well,
look like.
yeah, for example, if you and I were sitting down together and you confessed to me that, hey man, I'm having an affair, like,
Right.
and you shared that with me,
Right.
and all I did was go, okay, I'm going to keep that between us. Now I'm not responding in a
Right.
biblical way.
No, yeah.
I've got to be
Yep.
above reproach and have an obligation. Again, there's a lot of times, every time, there's always a consequence to sin.
Right.
And there is sometimes some things that come out of confession. But again, having trust that me going and saying, hey, you've got to tell Diana or I am,
Right.
and like seeing that through,
Yep.
like, yeah, that would suck.
Right. Oh, 100%.
And
Yeah.
but at the same time, trusting that that's what's going to be best long term in for your life
Yeah.
in the future. So
100%.
so yeah, for sure, there's stuff that
Yep.
is going to be shared. But again, it's going to be done,
Yeah.
hopefully, in a right way.
Yeah. One of our elders, Bob, he kind of talked when we did our first discipleship leader trainings. Because this question actually got brought up a lot. How do we keep things confidential, right? How do we make sure if people are sharing stuff with us, what do we do with that? And what if somebody says something? Well, I've done that in the past. And so I loved his answer. So Bob was an elder. He just stepped down, mid-70s, great guy. If you know him, he goes to our PV campus. And he was like, man, I just trusted that if the Holy Spirit wanted me to share this, that he would take care of it. Whether it got out or not, like that wasn't my reasons to hold back. If I was prompted by the Spirit, then I needed to do my part.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a real eye-opening thing to be like, at the end of the day, it was just kind of like, hey, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to trust that whatever God wants to do with my confession is actually probably what he wants for me. Now, it doesn't, again, he didn't diminish our role as believers to be trusted and keep that, but like, he was just really, I think it helped people to go, okay, all right. And I've heard people, man, they have shared everything with folks, and many for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think they found just some freedom in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you shared, I mean,
yeah, one of the guys in our discipleship group, I'm so thankful for him, and he shared some stuff that, like, I was like, wow, whoa, like, he's going through it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was so refreshing and so good and healthy to, like, then he has somebody.
Yeah.
Like, now you could tell for the first time, he's like, I've got people linking arms with me. And even though it's pretty hard right now, like, we're going to be trucking through together now.
Yeah.
And so for him, there's just encouragement in that for all of us. And I think that's kind of leads to the next piece of it, that this isn't, and I hit on it a little bit, but this isn't just for yourself. Like, you have to also kind of, again, coming back to, we do the hard things in being contributors, not just consumers.
Yeah.
And we got a responsibility as the body of Christ to be that person for other people that need it.
Yeah.
And so thinking about it in this way, that if you say, like, for whatever reason, I'm not going to be in a discipleship group, just not for me, then thinking about it in the light of, I'm not available to help carry someone else's burdens. Like, there's someone out there right now that needs this, that's struggling, that wants to change, but because of my lack of willingness to jump in, somebody's not able to be a part of it. And maybe even more specifically, lead too.
That's powerful. That's really good. That is, because we have been called to carry one another's burdens. Like, it's a command. Like, carry one. There are some things that people cannot carry by themselves. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, and this is kind of another piece to things as well. Just kind of reminding all of us that, yes, this is a spiritual discipline. This is important. This is effective. It's powerful, all these things. But at the end of the day, we are responsible for our faith. Like, we have an obligation to do our thing as well.
Right.
Because I can't walk around with you 24/7 all week.
Right.
So, like, if I have to be disciplined on my own to see growth. So there is a personal responsibility there.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's a both hand as well. It's a both hand. So, and then within that, as far as being that for other people, I hit a lot on the more piece with making better disciples.
Yeah.
This helps in making us better disciples. I think there's also the piece of it where, hey, this is an opportunity to make more disciples too, as far as when we're living out the calling like that is worthy, that we've received, then we're on the lookout for people that don't know Jesus,
Right.
don't have a relationship with God, that are in the dark, they're lost, they're wandering around.
Yeah.
And if we're intentional about trying to build relationships with those people as well, the people that God's put in our life, then eventually they're going to get to a point where they want someone to talk to.
Yep.
Like they're going to hit their bottom.
Yep.
And they're not going to confess to God because they don't have a relationship with God.
Right.
And so for us to be those people for the lost, it's a great opportunity as well to get them in the door, to get them engaged, and see God change their heart.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And you're right. They are usually looking for people to talk with.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have anybody. I mean, a lot of the pastoral conversations we may have, walk-ins, are people finally at the end of the rope and going, I've tried everything else. I guess I'll try the church thing, the pastor thing. And,
right.
and I know you've been a part of people sharing huge, and they just don't have anyone else in their life that they can do that with, which again is so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That they don't have people, because I think you also nailed it. The enemy's greatest tool is isolation. More and more, I think that is like at the root of it is pride. But like, man, what I just see, and especially in our culture, is this idea of isolation. Even though we're surrounded and accessible, we're so isolated. We're not known. We are alone, unseen, and unchanged. Which were such three huge words. And I think that resonates with so many people, especially those who are not believers or people who are kind of fringe on their faith. They were sitting in there yesterday, and I would imagine, because I felt that. I felt like, man, there have been times I have felt all alone. And then I'm reminded, oh man, I've got people. Like that's what I texted my discipleship group. I'm so grateful for you guys. I sat in there yesterday with my heart full, even though I was convicted on things, but I was like, I've got a group of people who I can really go to, and they have already prayed for me, and I've experienced that healing that James talks about. I've shared and confessed, and I've had a brother pray over me, man, and I've wept in our group, and just thinking back to how I felt. I felt that feeling of, man, this person actually cares for me. They responded in a way that was righteous. Now they held me accountable, but it was like, man, we love you. Want you to do better. But it's, for guys especially, it's hard to get to that place, and that's we're super prideful.
And that's where I do think a lot of guys do feel, if it's any of the three, it's the unknown.
Yeah.
That you've got a ton of people around you, similar to how I shared I was in community, but I wasn't known.
Yeah.
Because it was a self-choice in a lot of ways. So
I think that's all guys,
yeah.
right? Like we're in, like you said, we got car clubs and sports things, and the question comes, how you doing? I'm great.
I'm good, man.
I'm good.
Same old. You know how it is.
Yeah, this is exactly what we say. Anthony hit on this in men's breakfast. He talked about this with our guys. Is you'll come home, your wife's like, hey, how's Joe? And you're like, oh, he's great. Joe's awesome.
Doing good.
And your wife's like, well, do you know that da-da-da-da-da? And you're like,
no,
I had no clue.
Nope.
And you're like, oh, because we don't even want to go there, and so part of it is just us being willing in our conversations with our friends who are believers, maybe to go there. Like you said yesterday, find someone and confess with them. Maybe it's the other piece too, is if you got a friend that man, that isn't practicing this or in those groups, maybe just go to them and go, hey man, as your brother, I just want to help you. Like, I want to be that guy for you.
Yeah. And I think that, you can be an introvert and like not want to be around people. I get it.
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of both but there is a reality to, I couldn't unpack because you're right, danger and isolation.
Yeah.
Like that's where Satan wants to get you.
Yep.
But I wasn't able to unpack why that is so dangerous too. And so there's a lot of reasons as to why, but I just think of 1 Peter 5:8 of like, the devil's just walking around, like he's looking for somebody to devour like a lion. Like he is looking for somebody that's out on an island all on their own. And when we are in isolation, it's so easy to convince ourselves of lies or to believe lies.
Yeah.
It's really easy to start to convince yourself that your sin that you're going to engage in really isn't that bad, or is worth it, or you'll figure it out. Like, it's not a big deal. Right. But we weren't meant to live in isolation. Like, that's not God's design. I mean, we saw that in COVID too. Like, I thought about talking about COVID a little bit as far as everybody, like you were without community.
Right.
Like, and I'm sorry, but Zoom just wasn't the same.
No, it was not.
Like,
it was cheap.
You could say, like, we'll just meet on Zoom and do some of that, but it just wasn't the same. And so we even saw in COVID just like how important, not even just important, it's needed.
Yeah. And what I think COVID did was everybody tries to blame our isolation on COVID. My thought was it just exposed.
Oh, yeah.
It actually revealed I didn't have real people in my life that I had deep connections with.
Yeah. Like, people were just, they realized, like, because everybody, we're such a busy culture. So it's like always doing something, whether it is taking your kids to a basketball, soccer game, whatever. Yeah. Maybe it's going Top Golf. So maybe it's the entertainment piece, but it's like, hey, we're always getting out of the house and doing something. Our schedule's always full with these things that we think bring us meaning in life. And COVID happens and knocks all of that out. Yeah.
And too, it makes us right. So part of the way in which, if we're isolated or we convince ourselves our sins aren't bad, I just fill myself with a lot of other things.
Distract yourself.
I can distract myself. Yep. And then I was forced to call. And that's really what these groups do. They force me each week to show up and deal with my things. Like, they make me like be honest and real and evaluate my last week. Right. And so again, if you're an extrovert, these groups are great because, like, I know some of my struggle is not inner thinking and evaluating. Maybe, right, I just want to be with people and feel and love, like, but I have to like prepare myself as I go into my group to go, okay, where did I mess up this week? Like, what are the places that I've not actually lived out the commands that God's called me to, which is so good. So one last thing, you kind of briefly touched it. I know we didn't have time, so I want to give you a couple minutes to talk about, obviously, if you've participated in CTO, you kind of understand this idea of a confession checklist. But if you're brand new, so they're sitting in there yesterday and we're like, what's he talking about? What's a confession checklist? What am I telling everything? Like, what does that look like? So maybe just touch on that briefly.
Yeah. So it's something, again, CTO, Call to Obedience. It's a resource they have. And so it's a great resource. And so you can do it in different ways, and utilize it in different ways. For me, one of the things I did was I went in it's a checklist, literally. And so you go and you check the characteristic which applies to your life. And when there's more than one sin in that list that is listed, you circle the ones that apply to you. And so you just go and check it out and see and look at it. You know, it's got different categories. And for example, it's got, one is unwilling to confess sins to God and to repent, or another one is like unwilling to forgive those who offend me, carrying grudges, or being selfish, self-centered. Like, for me, like, I can check being selfish almost like once a week at least. Right. So you go and you check through all those, and then you get together, whether it's with somebody in your discipleship group, the whole group, like, you get together with someone. And the thing that was it was really great for me to do was just sitting down with Tim after I went through this, look at it together, like talk about it a little bit, and then specifically call out and confess those sins together as you pray to God. Right. And he's there, that person's with you there as a witness. Yeah. Because there's power, and you could say like, well, I'll just do that by myself.
Right.
But trust me, it's a lot different when you're doing it somebody and somebody sitting there with you.
Makes it real.
And you're saying it out. There's something about saying something out loud audibly that there's a certain power to that as well. Again, I think it just hits different. Yeah. And so confessing those things and asking for forgiveness, but then repenting and turning from those things.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. That's a great reminder. And so it's a great tool for us. If you haven't done that, it is scary, right? Let's call it out. It is really hard.
And for the people who haven't even, like, they're sitting there and they're trying to think through, like, what are all the sins I need to confess? Like, I know they're there, but like, I've not robbed a bank or murdered somebody before.
Right.
So I haven't done anything major. So
Right.
this is also helpful in that, to identify those things, because
Yes.
they're there.
They are there. Like, there's some parts about withdrawing,
Mm-hmm.
which, or escaping,
Mm-hmm.
not handling what you're supposed to. Like, there's a lot of questions in there. So a great tool, I would say, so you can find someone or anyone on our team. One of our pastors would be honored to do this with you, right? You can come in, say, I want to do a confession list. We can pray together. And I promise you too, like, yeah, I don't remember these things. Like, I'm not like keeping a running list of stuff. Like, I know
Right.
that's some of the fear too. Like,
Yeah.
I've done this now 4 or 5 times with different people. Honestly, man, like, I don't know what was on their list. I don't know all those details, right? I think God gives, I don't know, for me, I always feel like as a pastor, this sweet ability to like kind of forget those things.
Yep.
And so I'm not like judging you. We just want to help you.
Yeah.
Right. We want to help you take those next steps. And so maybe you don't have somebody in your life you can do that with. We'd love to.
Absolutely.
We would love to be a part of doing that with you and together. So just one last thing as we close. You kind of hit back on the James stuff. So I want to give you another opportunity to do that. You got a person sitting here, man, they are alone. They are lost. They're unknown, man. What do you tell them? How are we, like, what's their real next step? Like, what does that look like for them? Becoming a member, doing all, like, we can do that, but like, maybe you were sitting in there yesterday and you were really convicted that, man, I'm in danger.
Mm-hmm.
What are we saying to them?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what I did say to people who are sitting there and maybe still resistant to discipleship groups for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Find somebody and just give it a shot.
Yeah.
Like, trust that, like, because right now what you're doing and where you're at, it's not a good place.
Right.
Like, you would even say that you're not doing well. Like,
Right.
and so I would tell them, like, I can guarantee you that if you, within Quad City, we've got tons of people
Yep.
that will be there to listen, to hear you,
Yeah.
and help you take those next steps.
Yep.
And I would say that if you don't, then the danger is that not only can the sin start to destroy every component in your life, but it can also begin to pull you away from fellowship with God in a place where you feel completely lost. And that's if you aren't already there.
Yeah.
And so just trying to let them know that they can trust
Right.
us and people here at Quad City.
Yeah.
I would say just give it a shot. What do
Yeah.
you have to lose?
Right.
Like, can things get worse? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe you're thinking that.
Yeah.
But also long term,
Yeah.
like, they're going to be better than you can ever imagine.
Yeah. One more practical piece, because I want to tie in what your role is. So, parents of 5th through 12th graders, how do we begin to help our kids do this and do it well, so that they, again, we talked about last week about Bible reading and Bible memorization, about building those foundations so that when you become adults, you're healthy and have these things in you.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we do this? If I'm a parent, you're talking to parents now, what can you tell me that can help my kiddos in this area of community and confession?
Yeah. I would think the first thing is just trying to develop and be intentional of having, like, reminding on a regular basis to your kids that they can talk to you about whatever.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, there's going to be things that your kiddo shares with you that it's like, oh, we got to.
Well,
There's
same
a
thing.
there's a
Same thing.
consequence
Yeah,
with
yeah,
this.
100%.
Like,
Yep.
but like for them to know, and I tell students this all the time, like, your parents are your biggest fans.
Mhm.
They know you better than anybody else. Like, they're there for you.
Yeah.
So for parents, to remind your kiddos of that,
Yeah.
like that constant, like, hey, this is I want to be a place that you can go.
Yeah.
I would also say too that parents being okay with not being in that place at different times.
Okay.
Especially for when they're 14, 15, 16. They don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like in most cases.
Right.
So I'd also say that's a reason why pointing them to, like, trying to do whatever you can to get your students in those spaces with community, in transparency and in the goal of becoming more like Jesus and growing. That's why we emphasize that on Wednesday nights. And make honesty within small groups such a big piece to what we do. And we've had students share things in small groups that then the parent gets brought in on. And it's a good thing.
Right.
It's a hard thing, but it's a good thing.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest things that keeps students from bringing those things to their parents is the fear that now my mom, dad, guardian, whoever that is going to think differently of me.
Oh.
They're not going to be proud of me. They're not going to love me as much.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing for students. And so,
which is the same reason why as adults we don't share.
Mm-hmm.
Colin's going to look differently if I share this with him. And so, again, my hope is that we're teaching our kiddos, our students earlier to have authentic Christ-centered community, so that when they get to 30 and 40, when life happens, because it's coming, they actually have this practice that they know, you know what, I've actually seen this. I've done this. I've watched how it's changed my life. Even when it was really hard, like we don't say just do the hard things for our adults, right? We're teaching our kids the same thing, to begin to do the hard things in their life as disciples as well. You know, so
well said.
Yeah. So really good, man. Again, I appreciate your heart and your conviction, just trying to help people plug in. I love how you are building that into our students. And so grateful for that. So, man, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I know next week we're keeping on talking about these spiritual disciplines and just this idea of Sabbath. So you kind of touched on it. You touched a little bit on the culture that we live in. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to be really honest about that. And I love that conversation as well. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Colin.